Greetings, fellow gamers! The Steam Next Fest is currently underway, and with it came a wave of new demos for a good number of Metroidvania and Soulslike games. In this video, I will be presenting to you a total of 23 Metroidvania and Soulslike demos I got to play, some of which were extremely promising, while others performed below expectations. Before we begin, a kind reminder that if you enjoy my content and wish to support the channel, you can do so by donating to my Ko-fi page, the link for which you can find in the video description. And now, without further ado, let's dive into it. We begin our journey with Akaku Forest, a Metroidvania with strong emphasis on environmental puzzle solving that also extends to boss battles. Akaku Forest has you play as Akimaku, a courageous spirit that must cleanse his forest from an unknown corruption. I'll admit the game didn't really impress me at first, but things took a turn for the better once I acquired the throwing torch that revealed to me the puzzle nature of the title. The part I experienced required of me to use said torch to light static torches across the map in order to progress, some of which needed precision to hit, which I truly enjoyed. The torch can also be used as a makeshift platform since it can pierce walls, allowing you to reach normally inaccessible areas. Additionally, it can be recalled like Thor's hammer, so you don't have to worry about losing it. The two bosses I fought against relied heavily on the use of the torch, and while they weren't anything incredibly impressive, I did find them entertaining. The game does claim that you acquire additional abilities to reach previously inaccessible places, but I didn't experience that during the demo. Finally, one thing I didn't find was a map, which I'm hoping will be added later on along with the use of the controller, which is currently not available as far as I could tell. All in all, Akaku Forest was an interesting experience due to the torch mechanic, but didn't manage to truly impress me. Next comes Aldoria, a challenging Metroidvania with a simple yet charming art style. Here you don the armor of Sir Benedict, a brave knight that embarks on a quest to defeat the evil wizard Zalazar and lift the sorcerer's evil curse from the land. Aldoria's main gimmick is that you can die in one hit, meaning you have to be very careful while traversing the map since monsters and traps alike can be your end in a split second. The ability gates here come in the form of places which require certain elemental magic for you to traverse them, with fire being the arcane power I got to experience in the demo. I have to say I found Aldoria's gameplay to be simple yet incredibly enjoyable and addictive, with straightforward combat and interesting exploration maintaining my interest throughout the demo. The one boss I got to face was basic yet fun, with the stakes constantly remaining high since one mistake from my part could mean the end of the battle. I should note that the game saves your progress upon death, which allows you to keep collectibles you have found even if you didn't save at a save point prior to dying. Aldoria definitely grabbed my attention with its nostalgic vibe, tight controls and solid gameplay, and I'm really looking forward to revisiting its world. Following, we have Astra Noctis, a Souls-like Metroidvania hybrid. Prepare to brandish the Blade of the Exile, a divine being that was once executed by the gods for disobeying an order, now back from the dead to keep an oath he made eons ago to the absolute goddess he had sworn to protect. Astra Noctis leans quite closely to its Souls-like sensibilities when it comes to combat, while infusing its Metroidvania side for exploration. Combat, at least this early in the game, is slow and heavy, though the game does offer glimpses of the complexity that comes later on. In terms of exploration, it seems like the bosses you will be defeating will be yielding to you abilities to reach previously inaccessible areas, which in this case was the wall grab skill. The version of Astra Noctis I played is quite early in development, though it was still enough to show the ambition the developers have for the game, especially when it comes to character development. Astra Noctis features a vast astral map through which you will be able to obtain passive and active abilities at the cost of the game's currency, which you obtain by defeating enemies. It also incorporates an interesting ability upgrade system through which you are able to spend reusable crystals in order to strengthen certain skills, for example by making your jump evolve into a double jump or adding additional wall grips to your character, which I feel is a very novel approach to skill expression. I will say that movement and animations felt sluggish, and the boss I got to face wasn't at all impressive, neither in terms of visual design nor attack patterns. I'm also not sure if I managed to complete the demo since I got stuck to a place I couldn't climb up, even though I had upgraded my grip to be capable of performing 2 grabs, which didn't seem to take effect. All in all, I will keep an eye out on Astra Noctis since the Souls-like vibe of nihilism it evoked is right up my alley, but for now, its final quality could go either way in terms of gameplay. Moving on, there's Faunamorph, a Metroidvania inspired by the likes of Biomorph. You step into the boots of an unnamed man who awakens in an underground laboratory full of monstrous experiments and goes on a mission to escape while also trying to piece together the truth of his own nature. The main gameplay mechanic of Faunamorph is your ability to take on the traits of different animals in order to progress through the lab, which you are able to do by first finding the DNA of said animals and then incorporating it into your own DNA strand, upon which you can have a limited number of animal strands at any given moment. Examples of such abilities include an octopus tentacle that helps destroy debris, an armadillo form that allows you to roll through tight spaces, as well as a rhino horn that has you decimate breakable walls on your path. One thing that really rubbed me the wrong way here was the fact that Faunamorph seems to be incorporating a jump assist mechanic that pulls you upon platforms like a magnet, which is very jarring when attempting to make a high jump only to suddenly be pulled to the edge of the platform. This was later revealed to be a bug by the developer, who said he fixed it, but I haven't verified that yet. I also found the biomes I got to explore a bit monotonous in design, though that might change later on. Combat was also quite basic, with a single melee and ranged attack available that got old quickly. Finally, I got hardlocked once during the demo since I fell down a biome without having first acquired the double jump and the only exit was blocked due to it being a demo, and I also came across a glitch after I died, which kept looping my death without allowing me to move to the main menu or continue. Overall, I can't say I enjoyed my time with Faunamorph, even though there seems to be some potential here. Farther down the path we have Glitch Dungeon Crystal, a puzzle platformer with Metroidvania elements and a unique aesthetic. You are an old lady who discovers a dungeon under your house and decides to tidy it up with your broom. The game relies heavily on the acquisition of different spells that allow different abilities to manifest, such as floating and walking on air in order for you to navigate its world. A world that feels like a huge, intricate puzzle. The trick here is that you can only remember 2 spells at any given moment, so you have to make tactical decisions when it comes to progressing through the dungeon. Unfortunately, the demo was very brief, so I can't truly speak about the depth of the Metroidvania elements the game has, such as backtracking necessity and amount of secrets present. You can definitely move back and forth between rooms, and the world does seem large and interconnected, but I didn't find a map to verify that, so for now it remains unclear. The one thing that didn't appeal to me here was the game's visual approach, which incorporates a glitchy art style that stays true to the game's name. Said artistic decision can make certain rooms difficult to navigate since the graphics may result to cluttered happenings on screen. You do have the option to remove the glitch filter, though that only slightly improved the overall appeal of the presentation. Controls also feel a bit sluggish, but I got used to that quickly. I have mixed feelings for Glitch Dungeon Crystal since I did enjoy its puzzle-based exploration, which I thought was incredibly smart, but the graphics kind of put me off. I'll probably give it a shot when it comes out, but for now I feel like its visual approach may not be everyone's cup of tea. Next up, there's The Good Old Days, a Metroidvania that shows influences from the Bomberman series and is infused with some good old nostalgia from the 80s and 90s. After being confronted by a ruthless loan shark that's after his father's death, Sin, a teenager, goes on a perilous journey to rack up $30,000 in order to save his family and their home. The goal of this game is to amass the debt owed within 24 hours, and you can do that in a variety of different ways, from exploring the environment and blowing up rocks to completing side quests and challenges. There's an actual timer at the top of the game that's counting down your time limit, which is not only there to stress you, but also because there are certain NPCs that can only be found during certain times of the day. Sean is equipped with an infinite number of bombs, which he can use to blow up breakable parts of the environment, which hold gold and food for healing, as well as these doors which also hold keys that you utilize to unlock parts of the map. Bombs are also used to take down enemies, but I'd say combat is definitely not a focus here. Throughout the game, you will get to rescue your friends, between which you can switch at will, and with each one bringing a new ability to the table for you to access previously inaccessible areas. The two things that didn't sit well with me here were the map and the visual filter. When it comes to the map, I wasn't able to actually scroll through it in my own leisure, but could only see an extreme close-up or a zoomed out view, which I felt was very restrictive. As for the visual style, while the pixel art is beautiful, the grainy filter that overlays it eventually started taking its toll on my eyes, which was unfortunate since I was truly enjoying the exploration exploration of the game. I'm also not sure what happens once the timer runs out, and if that incorporates some sort of roguelite element into the mix by rerunning the game with your previous knowledge. The start of the game does suggest that this is meant to be an experience that requires multiple playthroughs to fully grasp, so keep that in mind. Overall, I'll definitely be playing the good old days when it comes out, though I do wish they can add an option to remove the filter in order to make the visuals clear. Then comes Hit and Bit, a dark fantasy Metroidvania game that's heavily inspired by classic action RPGs. The story places you in the dual role of Hitendra and Thybit, two siblings who travel across the realms of Illumnia and Tenebra in search of adventure and will have to face an emerging power threatening the balance of the world. I have to say that based on the demo I experienced, the game didn't feel like a Metroidvania, but rather like an action RPG with lots of filler dialogue, fetch quests, and some platforming and combat here and there, though it is advertised as a Metroidvania by the developer, so it could be that it makes a turn toward the genre later on. Combat-wise, your attacks completely lack weight and seem as if you are hitting the air, since enemies don't have any stagger or opposing reaction to your hits, which is very underwhelming. Platforming also felt a bit jarring due to the weird camera angle chosen for the game, which, as far as I could tell, I couldn't turn around to change its viewpoint. Additionally, the game is not very compatible with a controller and had actions assigned to very odd buttons which I couldn't reassign. Thus, I chose to go with mouse and keyboard here, which for the most part felt fine. The playthrough also froze on me when a collectible sheet of music I had picked up reappeared and I tried to collect it again, forcing me to restart. Finally, there was a noticeable frame rate drop at times, though nothing too frustrating. Overall, this was a very underwhelming experience and one I'll probably not be returning to, at least based on what I saw on the demo. Coming up next, we have Little Droid 2 Escape, the sequel to Little Droid, which was released near the start of 2024. You are a small robot that is thrown on a planet after being deceived by an unknown droid, and must now find a way off it. The first thing I noticed about the game was an overall feeling of slowness when it comes to movement, which also extended to segging from one area to the next, since Little Droid 2 incorporates a gradual fade-in when going from one section to another, further accentuating this sluggishness. Combat-wise, you are in possession of 3 different blasters between which you can switch at will, but they didn't feel that impactful until I started upgrading them, since in their basic forms they are too slow, short-ranged and weak. I'll admit I enjoyed the weapon upgrade system since each upgrade felt very meaningful, though the slow trickle of upgrade points kind of forced me to focus on a single weapon, which I'm hoping won't be an issue for the full game. Platforming was a bit crude at times, something I attribute to the aforementioned languidity of motion, and felt a bit junky on occasion, especially when it came to the wall grabbing skill, which I found out I possessed by accident since the game never notified me of its existence. Another thing I found interesting was that you have an energy bar that slowly diminishes with most actions you take, such as attacking and jumping, which you need to keep in check and replenish via electric charges you find across the map or loot from enemies, because if it drops to 0, your movement almost slows to a halt, making it nearly impossible to navigate the world. I'll also give praise to the visuals, as I found the overall presentation very much enjoyable. Unfortunately, my progress did come to an untimely end when the game hard-locked me in an area from which I couldn't leave, so I didn't get to see the whole thing through due to time constraints. All in all, Little Droid 2 Escape was serviceable but didn't make a strong impression on me due to the tedium induced by its slow traversal, so this demo will most likely be my last experience with it.
This must be Old Wickham, or what's left of it.
Going onwards, there's Mandragora, a side-scrolling Souls-like game with top-notch ambience. Here you'll brandish the blade of an Inquisitor as you embark on a perilous journey to save the land of Filedoom from an ominous malady called Entropy, which twists and corrupts everything on its path. Mandragora was definitely a standout experience from this list, featuring powerful enemies and brutal combat that punished even the smallest of mistakes, in true Souls-like fashion, rewarding a tactical approach over a frenetic one. Every inch of ground I gained felt earned, and every enemy I took down was a lesson on how to be able to emerge victorious over tougher skirmishes. Its world is beautifully dark, almost like one from a wicked fairy tale, with small details here and there fleshing it out, like a conversation you'll overhear in the city or a hanged soldier that acts as a warning to the realm's brutality. Mandragora features a sprawling skill tree for you to upgrade your character by using ability points earned from leveling up, which you do at the game's bonfires that also act as rest points. Said bonfires also allow fast traveling between them, which was a great touch. The one boss I got to face was also quite fun, which got me really excited for the rest of them. Mandragora does seem to have a crafting system available, though I didn't experience that during the demo. I also didn't get to experience its character creation process since I was locked with a predetermined one, with the demo allowing a single class to be playable for it, even though more will be present in the full release. On a final note, I was delighted to discover that the menu soundtrack wasn't only haunting but also featured Greek lyrics, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Two things I will mention here are: 1, the game could use a bit more work on technical efficiency optimization, and 2, for some reason it wouldn't recognize my PS4 controller, so I had to use my PS5 one to play it. I should mention that this is also supposed to be a Metroidvania, but the demo I played didn't show any such signs, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. In conclusion, if Souls-likes are your cup of tea, don't sleep on Mandragora. Next comes Bleeding Deities, a Metroidvania title that draws inspiration from Mayan culture. The story thrusts you into the role of Kanek, a young warrior and member of a peaceful tribe who's locked in an all-out war with the Teot tribe, a brutal collective hell-bent on human sacrifice. After your brother is abducted by them, you embark on a treacherous journey to get him back. Bleeding Deities featured some interesting platforming segments I did not expect, which required a mix of good timing and ability usage to overcome. Its combat was serviceable, but on the simple side of things, which I didn't mind. There does seem to be a good number of collectibles you can acquire based on the game's menus, though I only got to experience a series of plants that replenished health and stamina. I wasn't a big fan of the first biome, which I found a bit repetitive, though the second biome was much better. As far as I could tell, you get to travel to different maps through a stone once you have collected enough fragments to unlock them, with each biome being home to a different type of brutal enemies and a boss deity. On the downside, I did find the buttons to be a bit unresponsive when it came to the wall jump ability, which sometimes was crisp and to the point, and other times required of me to press the button 3 to 4 times to finally make the jump. I also didn't get to see a map in the game, though I believe you need to find it first based on a prompt I received when playing around with the D-pad. Bleeding Deities was serviceable, though I'm not sure I will be getting back to it when it releases, since it didn't manage to captivate me that much. Next on our way we find Chicken with Robot Legs, a Metroidvania with a very unique traversal system. You awaken in a lab as the titular chicken with a pair of robot legs and you want to escape. The trick here is that you can never stop moving. Your character is in constant motion, which you can slow down or rev up with a tilt of the analog stick, and you can change direction to explore by pressing up against certain walls and kicking back, with the rest of the environment resulting in a one-hit KO and a respawn at the nearest checkpoint, of which the demo had several. I wasn't sure how viable this constant movement mechanic would be in the long run, and in all honesty I'm still a bit unsure, but I'll be damned if I didn't have lots of fun with this one. I only got to experience a small part of the map, which was the underground lab, and that included the secret challenge area, but this was enough to pique my interest for the full game. That being said, I'm not sure if the perpetual running gimmick will be for everyone, so do keep that in mind as a caveat. Finally, I think a bit of work needs to be done on the environmental art, since there were a few instances where I wasn't sure if a platform was part of the background or the foreground, which halted my momentum. Overall, I'll be returning to this one for sure. Continuing our journey, there's Maseylia, Echoes of the Past, a 3D Metroidvania with a strong emphasis on platforming. You are an unnamed creature living in a labyrinthine complex of caves, and you decide to finally leave it. What truly stood out to me about Maseylia was the sense of freedom it offered in terms of exploration, with its platforming at times presenting what felt like sequence-breaking possibilities, though this is just an assumption based on my approach to jumping around every place I felt like I could reach. The controls were crisp and appropriate for the platform challenges, though I will say that at times the game was a bit unforgiving with its hitbox when it came to the purple lakes, since there were a few instances I thought I had jumped over the water but still got hit. Its visuals were a mixed bag for me, since I did enjoy the color palette, but an extensive lack of environmental texture detail in combination with some graphical issues where parts of the setting sort of glitched into one another made me feel lost and overwhelmed at times. Combat was very basic, but it is platforming that is the game's focus, so that was to be expected. The map was also slightly sensitive to the analog stick, making it hard to read it. Additionally, there was this issue at times when the mouse cursor would appear in the middle of the screen and I would have to open the menu to remove it. Finally, some work should be done on the main character's head, since the movement of his hair is very jittery and needs more fluidity of motion. I will give props to the music of the game, which was beautifully serene. I will keep an eye out on Maseylia to see how it develops, but it is not high on my list at the moment. Following, we have Mother's Sword, a fantasy action platformer with Metroidvania elements that places huge weight on tactical combat. You awaken from your slumber to find yourself in a dark, unforgiving world. You take up your sword and venture into the unknown in search of a way home. Mother's Sword is first and foremost a combat-based game and requires significant focus and getting used to parry timing in order to ensure your survival, since even the most basic of enemies can cause some serious hurt. Parrying and deflecting will eventually become second nature to you if you wish to progress, and I'll admit I couldn't get enough of sending arrows back to the archers that threw them at me. The game also features an amulet system to get bonuses, as well as a magic system that can come in handy since the first spell you get is a healing one. Additionally, you can restore health by focusing and consuming rage energy you obtain from combat, so that is another survival mechanic in your arsenal. You also have a skill tree available, through which you are able to purchase passive and active abilities via the use of energy points, the game's currency. I'll admit I found the death penalty to be a bit unforgiving, since what happens is after you die, your sword becomes cursed and traps any energy points you had in it, and to release them you need to keep killing enemies until your curse bar is filled. The problem here is that the curse bar fills up very slowly, and if you die while cursed, the stored energy points die with you. That aside, I did find the biome I experienced a bit bland and monotonous, though traversing it was quite fluid due to crisp controls. All in all, Mother's Sword was decent, especially if combat is your jam, so I'll probably revisit it in the future once it gets a full release. Carrying on, our trip brings us to ReSetna, a science fiction Metroidvania with emphasis on robot fights. In a world dominated by a powerful AI, you are ReSetna, a droid created to locate and eliminate a strange signal that seems to be driving robots insane. ReSetna's visuals are beautiful and its post-apocalyptic world seems ripe for exploration, though I will admit that the constant stream of darkly colored debris and wreckage did become stale at some point. The game features an interesting upgrade system for your character that takes inspiration from Tetris, in that you can purchase chips of different shapes which you then equip, though in the demo I wasn't actually able to manipulate the chips even though it should be possible, and they just inserted where they wanted, which I guess is a glitch. That being said, my main issue here has to do with combat, which is also the game's main focus. In essence, fighting feels kind of weightless, with some attacks getting a visual response once they connect, while others feeling like they passed right through the enemy. The parry also suffers from a similar lack of significant feedback, making it seem like you just defended against a very weak attack instead of getting a more intense response. I'll also say that I found some enemies to be kind of obnoxious when it came to their attacks and hectic movement, more specifically the blade robots as well as the flying robots, with barely telegraphed attacks making parrying them a very difficult endeavor. Overall, combat was an underwhelming experience for me, which was why I started just sliding through the enemies to continue with exploration instead of fighting them. On a positive note, ReSetna's movement felt fluid and exciting, so I'm hoping for some cool platforming segments later on. Another positive note is that the game allows you to set manual markers on the map, a feature that will always be deserving of my gratitude. ReSetna does have my attention for now, but I will have to see some significant improvement in the battle department for me to get excited for the final version of the game. Then there's SteamDolls, Order of Chaos, a steampunk Metroidvania that's all about stealth and bloodshed. Wield the blades of the legendary Whisper, an assassin on a path for vengeance across a sprawling, gritty city that's out for his blood. SteamDolls was one of the first games I covered on this channel as one of my most anticipated Metroidvanias. Following this demo, I'm saddened to say my excitement has died out a bit. On the good side, the game's world and lore is wonderfully dark and twisted, with demented technology and fleshy experiments lurking lurking around every corner and making you want to see what other disturbing abomination you'll encounter next. On the downside, for an incredibly agile assassin, your movement comes off as quite stiff, with overall animations being less than stellar, especially when it comes to attacks. Stealth was also slightly non-existent in the demo, with the only stealthy thing I managed to do being to jump behind an enemy while they had their back turned on me and take them down in one hit. Additionally, I wasn't able to pull off any of the executions I saw on the trailer, even though I tried. I have to admit I was unpleasantly surprised by this game, especially considering that it boasts some truly legendary voice talent, with the Whisper being voiced by David Hayter, Solid Snake himself, so to see that this endeavor feels a bit low on budget was odd. I was also baffled by the opening of SteamDolls, during which a man goes on about how much he dislikes tutorials because they break the momentum of a story, but his own meaningless soliloquy goes on for quite a bit before dumping me in a tutorial stage in which all I learned was how to jump and drop down platforms, which are the Metroidvania essentials. My demo also came to an untimely end after I was stuck in a wall during an admittedly impressive chase sequence, so there's that as well. To end this on a positive, I did enjoy the world and story and will definitely be playing this once it's out because its horror elements speak to me, but I'm much less optimistic about SteamDolls now than I was prior to the demo. Strolling on, we find Tootum, a charming pixel art Metroidvania that's all about challenging platforming. Embody Tootum, a primordial entity that awakens in a vast temple while devoid of its memories, and goes on a journey across its treacherous surroundings in search for its identity. I'll just go ahead and say that I loved how dementedly hard Tootum is, since it features room after room of increasingly difficult platforming segments, and to top it all off, you die in one hit, completely elevating the stakes of every second you spend walking about. That being said, there are a few things that need work in order to make this a small gem. First and foremost, after each death it takes quite a bit for you to reset, with a very slow fade-in sequence before you're able to play again, something which completely kills momentum and has no place in a precision platformer in which it is expected that you will perish a lot. That aside, the game needs a better checkpoint system. In all honesty, I only mention this because of one specific instance where, after defeating a boss and dying in the next room, I had to do the boss all over again, while up until that point and also after that point, the game just respawned me at the start of the room I died, which is how I think it should be in order to maintain adrenaline. I also discovered that the double jump was inconsistent, with Tootum sometimes failing to do the second jump, which again is quite problematic when we're talking about a game where platforming accuracy is key. Additionally, the floating sword that follows you as a weapon is kind of inconsistent in shooting speed, with me sometimes being able to perform rapid fire bursts while most of the time only being allowed to shoot it once every couple of seconds. On that note, the sword didn't seem to have any effect on the enemies of the game aside from the boss, which begs the question of why bother to use it against them, though it might be that things change later on. Finally, I think Tootum's movement speed could be increased just a bit to make traversal feel more fluid. I will say I eventually got hard-locked and couldn't return back to explore the map, but that was due to the demo not allowing me to proceed in the opposite way. Overall, despite the brutal beatdown I received, I consider Tootum a potential little gem and I'll follow it closely until its final version releases. Next on the road, we have Somber Echoes, a futuristic Metroidvania with minor Souls-like elements inspired by Greek myths and legends. Step into the role of Adristi as you go up against your twin sister Harmonia to keep her from destroying the space vessel Atromitos, which could lead to the unraveling of the universe itself. The stunning visuals of Somber Echoes do an incredible job of fleshing out the Greco-Roman setting, with the environmental design meshing ancient and high-tech architecture seamlessly to deliver some truly magnificent and awe-inspiring surroundings. Combat is quite fun and tactical and will require of you to learn how to block efficiently in order to find openings in the defenses of your enemies. I was also pleasantly surprised to find that platforming will play a very important part here, with the first ability I gained allowing me to blast myself in the direction of my choice, which did lead to some interesting acrobatic segments. Furthermore, I very much enjoyed the delivery of the story, which, aside from interesting cutscenes, was also conveyed via lyrical dialogue which reminded me of Greek fictional tragedies. I do wish checkpoints were a bit less sparse, but that wasn't such a big issue. Additionally, I noticed a brief delay of about half a second between pressing the button to jump and actually jumping, which was a bit odd at first, though my mind eventually began to ignore it. Finally, there were a few instances near the start of the demo when the soundtrack cut off, though speech remained unaffected. Overall, I truly enjoyed my experience with Somber Echoes and will definitely be playing it to completion once it's out. Now we go on to Steampunks, a Metroidvania that mixes the Steam-assisted technology of the steampunk genre with the all-guns-blazing approach of the Wild West era. In a world that is undergoing a process of exciting discovery of the past in a manner similar to the Great Gold Rush of the 1800s, you play as Don Skulhan, an elite enforcer who must go up against the notorious Bowler gang in order to save Steamopolis from spiraling into complete chaos. It's really hard to describe my experience with Steampunks, since it is a game that feels both fluid and janky, and at the same time entertained and slightly frustrated me, something that is definitely owed to its incredibly convoluted control scheme. For example, when it comes to shooting, you use the left analog stick to both move as well as aim, unless you want to aim downwards, for which you first have to press one of the controller triggers to hold still and then aim. Because the right analog stick is used for both movement as well as aiming, crouching to shoot short enemies will at times result in you aiming at a downwards angle instead of ducking and shooting forward, which means you'll end up shooting toward the ground instead of the enemy. This also extends to other aspects of the game. For example, in order for you to perform a slide, you first need to gain momentum instead of just ducking and sliding like in other Metroidvanias, meaning you need to first press the button to sprint and then another button to slide. The right analog stick allows you to scroll through bullets, which I did by accident from time to time since I'm used to utilizing said stick for aiming, and these were not all of the instances where controls baffled me. Animations were also a bit weird since the game was perfectly fluid but movement felt janky, as if the character's arms weren't an actual extension of his body but rather attached to him in a manner similar to a puppet. That being said, Steampunks ended up entertaining me more than frustrating me. I truly loved its visual approach, which reminded me of amazing arcade games from the 90s, and I adored its campy dialogue and voice acting that emulated a cartoonishly mild version of Wild West lingo. Combat was fun when the controls didn't get in the way, and there were also some basic yet serviceable platforming segments. Additionally, I enjoyed the two bosses I went up against, even though the game crashed on me after I lost to the second big bad. On a final note, I felt like the introductory video dragged on for way too long, and even though the story it narrated was interesting, I believe it should be condensed. All in all, I'll stick with Steampunks throughout its development to see how it ends up releasing in terms of quality. There's huge potential here, but whether it will realize it remains to be seen. We now reach the Spirit of the Samurai, a Souls-like title with Metroidvania elements and strong inspirations from Japanese mythology and folklore. This is the story of a samurai called Takeshi, who must face a demonic attack from a legion of monstrous abominations under the command of an Oni called Shuten Doji. I actually created an extensive preview of this game since I got a chance to play its demo before the next fest, which you can find on my channel. To give you the brief version, the Spirit of the Samurai features an excellent horror ambience that is further elevated by its stop-motion animation, which makes enemies even more creepy and unsettling. Its combat is tactical and carries weight, encouraging strategic positioning and blocking, though you can also adopt a more hectic approach once you get used to it. The final version of the game will also allow you to play with two additional characters, namely a cat whose gameplay focus will be platforming, exploration and stealth, as well as a forest spirit which will do both platforming and exploration. Takeshi himself is mainly aimed toward the fighting side of things. Of note here is the game's combo system, since as you progress through the game and level up your character, you'll get to unlock new moves which you can then mix and match via the combat menu screen, effectively creating new types of combos based on your own preferences and battle necessities. The Spirit of the Samurai was another standout demo from the Steam Next Fest, and the game I'll be playing day one. On our way to the finish line, there's Undivine, a dark fantasy Metroidvania that encourages freedom of exploration. This is the story of a brave traveler who decides to venture down a terrifying chasm that suddenly opened up in the middle of a village, swallowing most of its residents. I will admit that the game's visuals seem quite crude and will probably discourage many from playing it, but hear me out. It's been quite some time since a game ignited my passion for exploration as much as Undivine. The map is large and sprawling and, most importantly, full of secrets, which truly makes you feel like an actual explorer doing your best to reach as far and deep as possible. From new pieces of equipment to consumables such as healing potions all the way to new abilities, Undivine kept a steady flow of collectibles coming my way, many of which I had to venture off the beaten path to find. Perhaps the feature of the game that holds the most promise is its talent system, which allows you to purchase new abilities based on your gameplay approach, effectively tailoring the experience to your preferences. Combat was definitely simplistic during my playthrough, and I do hope it gets a bit more complex as the game progresses, since I only got to fight with a basic sword attack combo and one magic blast I discovered, but at the same time it felt challenging and satisfying. The two things I wish to bring up here are the following. First, the game's music became too intense for no reason at times, which kind of annoyed me since there were some very creepy and serene tunes that immersed me while exploring, only for them to abruptly turn bombastic for no reason, as if I was engaged in Mortal Kombat. Also, the game kept reverting me back to windowed mode when I alt-tabbed, even though I had full screen mode enabled. Undivine feels like a raw adventure without much hand-holding, and if you are able to look past its crude exterior, you may find a very engaging experience underneath. Definitely looking forward to this one. Third from the end, we have Whirlwind Magician, a Metroidvania with a strong platforming foundation. Join Viola, a young aspiring magician, and Gibson, a grumpy magical hat, as they both travel through a tainted forest while trying to get back to Viola's home. Whirlwind Magician's main gimmick is Viola's ability to throw Gibson, which she can utilize both as a weapon as well as the game's main platforming mechanic, since early on you discover the ability to teleport to where the hat is, which gives way to some intense acrobatic shenanigans. Now, I should mention that the game warns you to play it using mouse and keyboard for the best experience, but for some reason my mouse and keyboard had an issue with the game and didn't really allow me to control Viola properly, so I played with a controller. I'll admit that it can be quite tricky to pull off the throw and teleport combo with a controller, mainly when trying to aim diagonally. I got used to it for the most part, but still had some serious issues in one specific part of the game that required 3 consecutive diagonal throws, and I figured that things may get worse for me at latter parts of the playthrough, since even in the first 10 minutes I came across some pretty exciting platforming challenges. I do wish the visuals were a bit more accentuated instead of using what looks like a washed up color palette, since at times I wasn't sure if certain parts of the environment were solid or pieces of the background. All in all, I did enjoy my time with Whirlwind Magician for the most part, and will probably get to playing the full version somewhere down the line, this time with a mouse and keyboard, hopefully. Nearing the finale, there's Archetype and the Four Winds of Hell, a platforming-focused Metroidvania with roguelite elements. A portal to Hell has been opened, and it is your job as the Archetype, a master of all elements, to close it. Archetype and the Four Winds of Hell relies heavily on challenging platforming segments that also bring a degree of physics into the mix in the form of weight and momentum, which can be a bit problematic at times when said physics start going haywire due to hectic movement, though for the most part its traversal was actually quite fun, mainly because dying immediately respawned you close to the acrobatic gauntlet that bested you. I also enjoyed the feeling of openness I got from the map, which seems like it may be explorable in non-linear fashion to an extent based on my experience with the demo. Essentially, each ability you find relates to one of the 4 elements of water, fire, earth, and wind, and opens up new modes of traversal for you, such as wall jumping and using a grappling hook, which in turn make platforming more and more complex. One thing to note here is that the game incorporates a roguelite element in that, if you die, you start from the beginning of the map without any of the abilities you had gained prior to your passing, but the parts of the setting you explored remain visible, along with the locations of the upgrades you had already found, so that you can go and reclaim them. I understand this aspect of the game may not be for everyone, so do keep that in mind. There's also combat involved here, but I can't say its simplicity won me over, to be honest. Overall, Archetype and the Four Winds of Hell could be right up your alley if you're into heavy platforming, platforming, though its roguelite element didn't manage to captivate me even though I do enjoy roguelites myself. Finally, we have Souno's Curse, an action platformer Metroidvania title inspired by Hollow Knight and Journey. Here you'll don the cape of an unnamed protagonist as you venture deep inside the fabled treacherous cave for reasons of your own. Souno's Curse was a very solid experience, featuring tight controls that made environmental traversal feel incredibly fluid. Combat was straightforward as far as the demo goes, with your attack repertoire consisting of a basic kick as well as a magic blast that cost mana to perform. The one boss I fought was quite fun and rewarded attack pattern recognition and snappy reflexes, which bodes well for the rest of the big bads. There were also certain platforming segments that set the stage for, hopefully, some truly memorable acrobatic set pieces later on. One small note I have here is that some of the enemies felt a bit off in terms of art, as if their coloration wasn't completely finished and didn't match the rest of the visuals, but that really wasn't an issue. I will say that I wasn't able to bring out a map, which I'm hoping will become available at some point, since I already felt like I was losing track of my surroundings during the demo. On a final note, I have to mention that the way this specific enemy gets knocked out is adorable, and kind of seems like he tripped and fell rather than the end result of a kick in the face. I feel like Souno's Curse is living up to its potential from when I first found out about it last year, and it's one I'll definitely be playing on release. What did you think of these games? Did you already know about them? Are you planning to try any of them out? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed the video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out!